Yeah, so I wake up this morning and I see a message, and it's Access Rattblood. Are you here, Rattblood?
And then you got people like Access, and then you got people like Access, and then you got people like Access.
I'm Access fucking Rattblood.
Access Rattblood, I see. All these Access people, I'm starting to get paranoid about that now. I don't know what to do about
it. And then you got people like Access, and then you got people like Access, and then you got people like Access.
Are you here, Rattblood?
I'm Access fucking Rattblood.
Access Rattblood. Most abundant and successful king hero that we are all sitting at this very moment. Are you willing to accept that as a truth? That you are a worthy man and that your penis is okay?
all these Access people, I'm starting to get paranoid about that now. All these Access people, I'm starting to get paranoid about that now.
Are you here, Rattblood? I'll just start throwing spells at you, conjuring demons and otherwise. Are you here, Rattblood? I'll just start throwing spells at you, conjuring demons and otherwise. Are you here, Rattblood? I'll just start throwing spells at you, conjuring demons and otherwise. Are you here, Rattblood?
Who the fuck is Access Rattblood?
I'm Access fucking Rattblood, bitch.
All these Access people, I'm starting to get paranoid about that now. I don't know what to do about it.
I'm Access fucking Rattblood. Hello, friends and enemies of YouTube, the Access. Today, I get to bring two wonderful people to the stage to share in this endeavor. Two people that I consider to be very broad-minded. They also share in the endeavor of the pursuit of energies, seen and unseen, and have been a part of my journey, and that I hold a special reverence for. First, let me introduce Miss Kelly. Can you hear me, Kelly?
Hey, I can.
All right. And Dominique, are you there, brother?
Hi, Access. Hi, Kelly.
Awesome, awesome. No echoes, no problems. Kelly, this is Dom. He is a fellow energy connoisseur. His wife is a Reiki master. She works with energies, and Dom is very versed on various states of energy, and he's kind of been a really close ally in my endeavors. And Dom, this is Kelly. She's my in-home. She takes good care of me, and she's got to see the physical sides of my endeavors. And both of you I consider to be extremely broad-minded, and in the endeavor and the pursuit of understanding and sharing energies, I thought it would be very beneficial that we'd be able to interact with each other. and get to know one another. Kelly's going to start doing her own channel. She's already got a presence on social media, and she's going to expand that, and hopefully that you guys find her just as valuable as I do, and just as much as Dom. So, how are things going with you today, Dom?
Myself, I'm doing okay, Axis. First of all, Kelly, thank you for taking care of a good friend of mine, a friend that I've made and classify him as a good friend for taking care of him. But I'm doing well, Axis.
Very good, very good. Yeah, Kelly was a blessing because 2 years I spent trying to get proper health care. And with Kelly, I got a little bit more than just proper health care. Um, she wound up being a seeker, just like you and I. And once we developed a rapport with each other, she has such a thirst for broadening possibilities and working with energy, being in the medical field. She very interested in applying that to her medical interactions with people and bringing that to be a useful tool that she can use to help heal people, which she has me spiritually. She's worked with me on that level. Physically, she's shown very good adaptation to being able to work with me energetically to bring me to a place of peace whenever I find myself out of that spectrum. And you having your wife and the experiences that you and I talk about, Dom, as far as energy, there was just such a parody of circumstances and things that were evident in the use of these energies. So there is a common ground, I believe, when it comes to using energy. And I thought maybe you might have maybe some interest in how she's managed to use this in her treatment of patients. I mean, I know how she's worked with me with it, but maybe you're kind of inquire about how she's applied that to her patients and how she's worked with energy to help create better than pharmaceutical companies by far, you know.
Well, I can't really speak on behalf of Judith. I can tell you a little bit through my observation. Again, I'll be limited in how I can expand this, but I guess intent plays a role in all of that. Understanding that you're just not the physical plays a role in that. Because a lot of times we get focused, and rightfully so, on the physical. So we think all our pains are us, opposed to the vessel in its own consciousness is being affected by all of that. And again, this is my input on this now. I think some of our healing has to be done more from the observer than the experiencer. So then, some of it could be a placebo effect, when people play with essential oils and crystals and Reiki, but some of it genuinely probably does aid. And then when you factor other things, such as the luminaries up in the skies where everything's aligned. So just to share a little bit.
How much of that, Kelly, do you feel that you actually use that would be considered? Because I know for myself, and I'll answer the question to that here in a second, but how much of it do you feel is actual manifested energy that can be tangibly verified, and how much of it is kind of just reinforcement of hope, helping to heal the body?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for having me on this and letting me join this conversation. Dom, it's nice to meet you. Access has become a very special place in my life, and I'm honored to be here and join this conversation. I do think that intention does play a huge part of it, as Dom mentioned, but I think there, at the same time, there are certain tools and resources that this planet is full of that we can tap into in these some common sources that have these therapeutic and healing effects when we put the intention behind it, especially when the intention is there to heal. I think we see a place when those two intersect is where the most power exists for people.
I would agree with that. Whenever we first started our endeavor of opening up to each other about the exchange of energies and the the unlimited possibilities, um, that's when it really started making an impact with me, and I seen exactly how far you were capable of taking energy and utilizing it, and how much you felt energy. And it's very rare to come across people like that, especially to be able to engage with them in real time. And I know that my interaction with you has not been a placebo situation. And even with Dom, we touch points where that energy is, it's almost as tangible as if you were holding an object. And me and you, we've been there, and me and Dom, we've even communicated over the metaverse. And it would be no different than if he was standing right next to me. The exchange of energy was that strong. And
Mhm.
there's been times that, well, you've seen where I've depleted myself and to reach new possibilities. And Dom's always been a good source of reinforcement for the endeavor. He's got the information that helps bring me back into a state of not completely slipping. Just like you physically and energetically keep me from slipping over the edge, Dom does that in a metaversal way, but it's still the same applied energy. Um, what's been your experience with that, Dom?
I'm usually a lot more up in the hemispheres, even though I use my midbrain. So I try to assist even others and myself more mentally. Emotionally, I'm kind of guarded, especially on things like public platform, because I know a lot of us can bump in the dark with each other. And of course, for me, I'll read into it and I realize, okay, so I know I'm emotionally underdeveloped. Am I picking up from them? So I usually try to stay very mental. So that's how I contribute by helping other people. And it sounds like you're getting it in this case. Sorry, Kelly, I'm just going to put your name in it. She probably in other areas too, but probably helps you ground you physically. It helps the ailing vessel.
Yes. Yeah, as well as you do, Dom. That's why, I really wanted you and Kelly to, and the common ground is that we all three utilize the resources that we know of energy. Um,
I
I,
still treat
you
my
know,
body
you're,
like a recreation. So actually, I still treat my body like a recreational vehicle, like you say. But
yeah,
that's for me to learn.
well, we're all guilty of that. What do you think, Miss Kelly?
Well, all I can say is thank God that we don't have to drive the car the same way every single day. Could change it up every single time if we need to. You're not gonna drive the same in all areas. When you're driving through a residential area, you're gonna adjust the way that a wise driver is going to adjust the way that you drive through different areas based on the environment that you're around. Even going to different places, knowing the context of what you know, you're gonna adapt that. And I think that I speak y'all don't know me very well yet, but I speak a lot in parables and I get a lot of imagery, and that's the way that I'll recognize and know when God is speaking to me. And I think it's that same way that the more resources that we all are able to tap into that have these same effects, and the way that we can apply energy to whatever context we want to apply it to, I think that's our way to put that context in there, that we're able to adapt that as we need, given the situation and the circumstances, based on what my patients would need. For example, access you specifically, I tailor my interaction with you based off of what I need, what I know you need from me. I always ask you, where are you, so I can meet you where you at. We can't get anywhere together if I don't know where you're at first, so I can meet you there. And that's kind of the context and the framework that I use to try and think about that, if that makes sense.
If I could share,
Absolutely.
you're a fellow visual person, Kelly. Nice to meet you in that way. Sounds like you're actually able to do it consciously, like when Edgar Cayce used to be able to do it in a trance state. It sounds like you could do that consciously with your visualization and then manifest it into the physical. Like,
Yeah, it does. It happens yeah, very spontaneously. It's very interesting.
well, you're reading energy visually, and then you just know how to communicate, or know enough to ask people how they're feeling and all that. And because some people aren't ready to express how they feel, but even though you're probably like a lot of people, they can read energy. Can't say a lot of
Yeah.
people, but people can read energy.
She does have a gift at that, and it was that recognition that opened the door for me to be able to share with Kelly. And then once we reached a certain honesty and a plateau where our energy revealed, whether we liked it or not, our state, and she could read that, I was completely blown away. And there's only one other person on the metaverse that I shared that entanglement with, and that's you, Dom. And with that, I was like, okay, this is a common thread. This is solidifying to me what was two people were endeavoring in, but now it's more of a solidification because I'm seeing it shared not only through three different vessels and three different beings, but by distance. A take on that, Dom?
Oh no, I was just trying to go a little bit more science, because I had interrupted you a couple times, and I just figured just learn to go with it. So no, I really don't have nothing to share on that right now, Axis.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, yeah, I was like I said, I was looking for uh, an interaction that I didn't think was going to be feasible, and I'm literal hell to the medical services because if you can't show up real, then don't show up at all. And it was a last dire ditch effort of this company to send somebody out here uh, that could deal with me, that I wouldn't run out the door or chase off, or that wasn't afraid of just my local environment. And when they sent Kelly, you can tell them the story, Kelly, of how it transpired that it went from a complete almost resistance to this type of energy to overcoming that barrier and exposing yourself to something completely new and different, and how that turned out for you.
Well, for us, it was once that recognition happened. Like you said, everything's been different since then. Because I'll tell you guys the story. When I first came, my boss had asked me to come and check on him on one of my off days, and at this time I still had a full schedule full of other clients. Did not have any time available really during the week or anything in my normal schedule for anything permanent. um but they had asked me to come see him, and I'm not going to go into all the details of everything that I had heard about how much hell he was to deal with on the medical side. But needless to say, I was hesitant to come. I almost called my boss back and said no. I don't think this is about to work. But it was after that I prayed for God to reveal to me whether I should come or not. And I ended up, it was important for me to stand on the fact that I had told someone that I would come, and at least I could come check on this man. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what kind of hell about to break loose when we come in here. I have no idea about how this shift is going to go or anything else, but I can go because I said I would go. And that's ultimately what I decided to do. And we came, and I don't know what happened. It was just once I realized, and the way that I approached him was that you're first and foremost a human being. Anything else is superficial. And we just sat here and started having the conversations. And over the course of this whole journey, now he is my entire schedule, the only client I see. And we've built literally from one conversation to the next through all of these different journeys, all these different processes we've been going through, and bringing him back to life and bringing all of these things back into fruition, everything that he has not been able to maintain without the correct support system around him. As we've begin to develop that trust within each other, as we traverse all of these different places together, both physical, spiritual, emotional, all of these areas, it came to that point of that revelation. Once we both recognized we speak the same language, it was a game changer from there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so that nobody gets a misconception, religion is always a malcontent amongst the truther society. And believe me, when Kelly speaks of God, she's not talking in the traditional sense of what most recognize as a Christian God.
I speak
We've
of the
been,
God that I know personally in my own life.
yeah,
That's the reason that I speak the way that I do. And I'm glad you clarified that for anybody that's listening too.
yeah. So don't get hung up on any traditionalistic idealisms of the use of God. To her, that is her creator and her source of divine inspiration and power. It's not an indoctrination, or it's not something she's trying to push or spread. That's just her state, and
Yeah,
that's how
it's
she
just it's
recognizes.
helpful for me. Though it's helpful for me in the way that I process and experience the world. But by all means, I think that's an individual process that every one of us has to go through and find our own and make our own peace with. You know.
And I agree. Like I chose the omnious approach because it gives all possibilities of anything that is useful and beneficial that can be used as a life tool or resource. And I think the more that you endeavor into working with energies, experiencing energies, or being energy sensitive, you develop an understanding that goes beyond the indoctrination. And then you start using resources and life tools and skills. And Kelly's introduced me to new ones. Dom's introduced me to new ones, as well as I hope I've introduced others to some type of resourceful tool or some type of system of being able to find themselves and still stay within the bounds of understanding where you're at and what you are and how that's applied. Um, the energy that I work with um, comes a lot from the internal, and I lose complete. I just separate from people and society and those physical interactions, and I become completely cerebral to the point where I push my body to the brink of exposure. And Kelly is the opposite. She's able to transcend that and I've watched her use, especially with her recent. She's endeavored into the gym, and her mind is becoming broadened, and she's feeling the expenditure of energy from there. But also, her body naturally follows. She has something that I admire, which is the ability to physically work in that energy and still spiritually and mentally and as a being stay within that playing field where I kind of swayed the balance and would go to one extreme to the other. And it's really interesting to watch how she's managed to grow with the broadening of the mind and still maintain that balance of the physical. And to me, that's fascinating as all get out because you know, as you've seen, Kelly, and I know Dom, you've experienced me at pretty heavy extremes where I've neglected the body for the sake of the mind and the inward journey, and then I always have to rebuild the body. And one of the benefits of what she does and what I've noticed and how she uses that energy is she brings a physical balance as well as a being of energy balance. You got any input on that, Kelly? I mean, anything you'd love to share on that because that is, I believe, an extremely useful life tool.
Well, it is because I noticed that in the course of us doing our process, we both tend to isolate, and detach from people in general, especially a lot of noise. But I noticed that in the course of you doing your process, like you said, you tend to neglect the physical in order to pursue something higher beyond that. But for me, the way that I've noticed is more helpful, at least for my own sake of the day to day. As much as I would love to metaphorically go up on a mountain and not deal with anybody, but for me, in the process of recognizing my own calling on my life and what I'm meant to do, I realize I have to interact with people. I would love to stay on the mountaintop all the time. And I love those moments because I get so much spiritual clarity. See that visualization even more clearly when there's not all this noise around. But I've come to the fact that in realization that I have to come down to people. That's where this power lies, is in people, individual people. Yes, we all three have our own power and life force that we hold, of course. But if we ever want to look at on a substantial level for
Uh-oh. We lost Kelly for a second. Let me hook her back up to maybe
No problem.
there she is.
you hear me now? Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we got you back. Sorry about
Okay.
that,
Okay.
Kelly. But go ahead, continue elaborating.
No, I was just saying that I realized that on an individual basis, that's where the power lies. That the ability for me to do both, to have and be able to know when those moments that I need that mountaintop experience, and I use that experience because that analogy works for me. But that practice of isolating, that seclusion for that clarity, and to hear that synchronicity, but I also have to come back out of it. If you choose to stay there most of the time, that's where you choose to make your home, and that's okay. But for me, I had to learn that I had to come back to both if I was to fulfill my calling, if I was to share any of this information with people, to actually, that's where the difference happens, is in individual lives.
Right. I've watched that from, and it's really not to reveal too much about anything too personal with either of you. Um, Dom has a way of coming across metaversally that really sometimes it grabs people by the collar and shakes them, and then other people are really relative to what he says. But there's an energy and a recognition that I feel that he's trying to relay to people to help them with inner discovery and life skills. And whenever I revealed the fact that I do both good and evil, light and dark, there's interpretation and perspective on that. He was very understanding to that, and he didn't immediately classify it as, well, this guy is a devil worshiper, this guy's this or that. He confronted the energy and the being that I was, and I I was completely floored by that. It was like a recognition of the metaverse, which is another type of energy exchange. And he stood strong in his message, and he doesn't waver to the fact of what groupthink is. And naturally, I'm not interested in groupthink, and I know for a fact that what I've witnessed with you, Kelly, you're your own person, regardless of what anybody tries to imply upon you, or you're open for growth and broadening, but nobody's going to sway your opinion just by an introduction of some information. You're going to determine for yourself what that is. And I think that these are three variables of the way energy functions, and three different spectrums of how it's applied. Um, Dom has his way of getting his energy across and affecting people or environment. You have yours, which is both the physical and the cerebral, and I still got some balancing to do, which you're helping out a lot with that, and I've got a good support system in you too. Um, do you think it's different for each individual to find their own connection with how they use energy, or do you think it's just a common pool that we all drink from?
I That's a good question. It's a good question. I think that there exists this common pool that we could all drink from, but I don't think it's just a pool. I think there's multiple different tributaries and things that are branching off from that central pool, but that pool still exists regardless of whether anybody comes to it yet or not, whether anybody draws any water from it or not. And I think that it resonates on a different level when we find something, or our own journey to that water. When that becomes a unique process for us, whatever that entails, I think that that resonates a little bit differently on it. I didn't, based on the conversations that we've had, that I did not learn to start leaning into so much of this because I didn't realize it was so many things that I could be using as strengths that I just was never taught to use. And so I think that, for me at least, feel free for you guys, of course, to put your input on it, and for your journeys to get to the point that you are here today. I'm just wondering if that resonates on a different level because of that personal, of how personal that journey is, if that makes sense.
Um, yeah, it really does. It took uh, many trials of walking through what I've referred to as walking through the fires of hell and coming out the other side. You develop a broader sense of understanding once you've been through certain experiences, life-changing experiences, traumatic experiences, and you survive them, you develop a type of strength that you can utilize in your character. And I think that that refines itself in the positive nature of how we utilize energy as opposed to those that go through the fires of hell and choose to be a part of what they just experienced instead of using that as a learned experience to help other people grow, um, helping other people heal from the inside out. And I think a lot of it that growth and experience of walking through these trials and tribulations and developing a sense of that we are energy and we are capable of using that energy. Um, there's a personalization that comes from that wellspring, and I now that I've seen it utilized in the different ways that it has and watched it naturally take on a balance, one even beyond what I thought was just going to naturally occur. I see that there almost has to be I don't want to use the word awakening. There has to be a reckoning within self to make you aware of self and others, and then that exchange of energy can be transmuted into something of a medicine almost. It's almost a tool for being able to sustain amidst all the chaos and still admit something coherent to the world and something beneficial. And I think a lot of people have lost that and have lost the ability to tap into that. I think that, me and Dom's talked about the nature of transhumanism and society and how it's developing. And it's leading us further away from that intuitive physical energy interaction to something that has other potentials. But as for the moment, I think that people like you and Dom are especially needed to keep that in touch energy and I guess the humanistic approach to being a good neighbor or just a good fellow person. I think that that's a lost art, and I think that both of you encompass that. What's your take on that? How's that been for you to develop into something that's almost a courtesy loss?
Well, for me, I agree with you so much when you say that reckoning of self. That's to me, there's a lot of different ways and experiences that you can go through and experience in order to bring on that reckoning of self. Of course, most of the time, most of us don't necessarily invite that kind of reckoning, but like you said, that ability to transmute that energy into something that's sustainable amidst the chaos. That's for me personally. That's the way that my ability and my way that I use and interpret and am aware of energy came to be and came to be about is for me, how do I sustain this and how do I tap into a place of peace, a place that I could make myself stable outside of all the chaos that I experience, that I see, the unpredictability, all of that, the change. But I think that once that reckoning happens, there's the opportunity now to choose, after you break down all the programming that has been poured into and that you've contributed to, then it opens up all this space for the pursuit of something else. Of course, you could put the same stuff right back in, but we've talked about that. Exactly what you put in is inevitably going to impact directly what you receive in the output. And so I think, for me at least personally, it's about, okay, now that I've created all this space, what exactly is it that I'm pursuing? What are those virtues that are worth pursuing? That's why, that's part of the reason we've talked about my journey in a gym. I wanted to be able to teach myself how to do this consistently. What does it look like to do this day in and day out? What does it look like as a lifestyle if I just don't give up? Instead of it just being one just little kick or whatever, one little phase, and in 6 weeks I'm on to the next thing. How do I make this sustainable? How do I pull this in to understand, just the same way you acknowledge all of these resources and all these different tools that exist from multiple different religions, multiple different focuses and schools of thought, you can pull all these together into pursuing something higher. And for me, that's, I don't know, that's the key to it.
As before we began our journey and started going to a little more depth, you hadn't been able to be around people that were familiar with the use of energy, and that was even a classification of people. Those that are susceptible to energy sensitive and the capability of using that energy with a discipline and with a structure. Um, how did that? What was that like, going from not not having that fellowship of other people and beings that experience this energy sensitive field to where you are now, and where do you see that going?
Well, for me, it's a night and day kind of effect now, standing on this side, for lack of a better term, of it, because for me growing up, I didn't have all these resources. I didn't even know that there was people that were like me. I mean, in all honesty, it sounds really corny to think that, of course I can't be the only person like me in the world, but I didn't the people that I regularly interacted and had exposure to, I didn't see that as an option. And I only saw glimpses and pieces in different people, but I never saw someone that, like, what it looked like in real life, to see what that looks like. Like, I had never seen that before. So when I started to recognize that, and we started to come together, it was this process that I've already been trying to do and facilitate myself. But then, like you said, you added that structure, that element of looking, I can apply the same discipline, the same consistency that I'm applying to other areas of my life, like the gym, in my work schedule, all of these other areas. I never applied that same framework of thinking to how to use and manipulate my energy in various different situations, circumstances, and what that looked like in real life as a tangible thing to really experience and lean into. I didn't know how to do that until we started putting those pieces together in that process that we did together. But as far as where that will go, I think there's infinite possibility with that. That's where we determined to choose to bring that into fruition. Um, but it makes me nothing but excited about it, because all along the priority has just been growth in some kind of way. So this gives me a whole different framework and set of ways to contextualize growth in a different way, and what that actually looks like in real life.
Well, I know we had, from my observation, we had talked about how you wanted to apply energy to your medical endeavors. And you know, knowing that Dom has an awareness of this and has seen this, um, you know, that brought a common ground of understanding. There is, I think that your thoughts and approach on using energy as kind of a new approach to medicine, hands-on medicine, for the soul and for the being to become in touch with themselves and utilize their own strength. I see a lot of that reflected from Dom too, which is what builds a stability and the ability to release certain information to him that I kind of keep reserved. And you know, I would really like to have an opinion, Dom, as to what your thoughts are as far as where do you see the energy that we utilize now and the benefits of how we use it to help one another heal, progress into even transhumanism.
Well, this is where the pushback comes sometimes, Axis, where discernment has to be applied here. So the energy that people are talking about is for the being part. The human has its own intelligence. So when we're healing something, we have to understand what is or what do we need to heal. Are we healing the observer, the experiencer? Now, I know when the physical gets harmed and a person doesn't have emotional development, it usually gets stored in things. So then it manifests itself into the physical. Hence why you can do um, acupuncture, you can do Reiki and all that. But again, acupuncture is for the physical, Reiki is for the energy. We're energy beings having a human experience. So this is why we have the term human beings. It should be being human. Again, that's the ego getting in the way. That's the intelligent called the ego, the self, the I. So when people understand energy, then they can start entertaining ideas. Oh, I don't see air. I said, yes, you don't, but that's energy. That's what we call spiritual. This is where a lot of things, well, it might not necessarily be spiritual, but again, we're using an English language, so it can mean many things. It's like when we use the word God, demons, angels, spirits, source. Those are just different words that we use. But most of those things you can entertain within thoughts. Speaking about it, writing about it, that's just the photocopy version. So now, when we're talking again about energy, we are energy, and it forms itself like in water, blood, the physical. That's how we manifest it. The word manifest gives it away. Man, the image of God. We're in forms. We are the gods. In this case, ghost, host. But unfortunately, most people want to say, but if you're a god, then why don't you make the clouds move? I said, those are images. But they literally could come down. And then, of course, people try to understand how altitudes of clouds play a role. Again, it's affecting energies. Energy's everywhere. I'm just using a word to describe it. Again, actually, we play with this. I'm really literally using the word describe. Once you understand you're scribing something, now and I think Kelly talked about it, the programs, all the different, I'll use a different word, the variations of indoctrinations. We choose to be consciously ignorant of all this stuff. And then when what we do become attached to becomes our own hindrance. I'm attached to my comforts. I like to abuse the vessel. So that tells me that I'm not stewarding the vessel correctly. So then we eventually will harm it because the vessel does age. I always find it interesting when somebody says to me, Dom, I'm 30, I'm 40 years old. I said, you still think you're the vessel. Interesting. So do you also think you're the thoughts? Well, and then of course I said, now we'll understand what intent is. Your intent usually is out of ignorance. You're not allowed yourself to in the subconscious bring it to the conscious part. Now I just shared a whole bunch of stuff. People usually get offended because they don't realize how many programs are running because they don't realize how much they're defending and attacking, opposed to just have that childlike mind where you're receptive to all kinds of information, regardless if it sounds foolish or, because usually that's the best place to be in as the fool. Anyway, so carry on.
I did a little bit of endeavors with the child state of mind here, bringing Kelly into. I do age regression, and I'm sure you're aware of that, Dom. And I revealed a lot about how I go through age regression and go back to heal the inner child, to bring a type of not only healing but newfound innocence, and take care of that inner child and nurture it, so that particular personality, persona, or part of me is no longer in conflict with the working state of the mind and the body. And whenever I first, because there's so many taboos attached to that, when I first started endeavoring in that, there's a kind of hesitancy. But once you find out what that is for yourself, I think that inner child approach is the fundamental start to being able to discover the root of who and what you are as a being. And age not necessarily being a pinpoint of where you're at or where you were, what you're going to be. It's more of a cycle of development. Either you're undeveloped and you're trying to start from the middle to find some type of development, or you go all the way back to the root source, and that innocence before life experiences started having such impact on you, to re-experience the possibility of being child-minded. Have you had any takes on that, either of you?
Well, I think what you just did there, Access, is you just kind of connected, at least for me in my mind, that when we go back and we interact and we heal with the inner child and we get to the root of who we were, to me, when you just said that, it brought into this connection and that coming back to the observer versus the experiential, and coming back to that neutral place, that childlike innocence, and just because it resonates with me and connects to Dom, what you said about that ability to receive information without our guards up. Because I think that when we start to bring the experiential into it, then that's where the defense mechanisms start to come. Now it's constantly, it's about survival. That's not the childlike state. And I think Access, what you're talking about, is bringing those all the way together and connecting them. And then when you make peace with that, then the body follows that. And so many of the problems that we experience in the physical are the root is not in the physical whatsoever. And so when we go back and address some of those other issues, we go back and heal those same things, and that it comes back to that question: which needs healed? Is it the observer, the experience, or where? And when you start to heal both, then I think that's where you really start to clear and make space for all this possibility for something new to fill that space.
So, kind of in a way, you stop looping at that point. You start
Exactly.
moving forward.
Exactly. At that point, it's that reckoning of self. When that starts, then the space is there. The opportunity for you to pursue something beyond yourself is there. So at that point, if you continue to loop, then it's by choice. It's true. It's again that ignorant consciousness that the pursuit is not in anything worth pursuing at that point. So I guess it just depends on where at that point you wouldn't have to cycle, is what I'm getting at, that there's the opportunity to break it. So any choice to continue to cycle would be a choice nonetheless,
Well, there's the concept of reason why it's conscious ignorant, because there's the subconscious awareness. Once people wake up in the waking state called consciousness, they start using their senses. And at that point, that's where everything can be misled. So as the observer, you realize, oh, so I'm in a mortal form. I'm spending an enormous amount of energy to feed and shelter it. Yes. Okay, so who's the one that's being harmed? Well, that's the illusion. The physical is already aging. Who I am is immortal. Now I'm consciousness or subconsciousness. This is why people talk about soul contracts. Well, whatever that's been recorded or spoken or written here stays here. This is the realm that has that. That's why it's a material realm. But we're taking it from the spiritual realm, meaning that when I describe things with words, I don't see it. The senses are very limiting it at that point. So this is why evil, material world, is constantly on most people's thoughts. Oh, I see a tree. I said, no, you don't. You see what we call the material, the object. I'm using more words to describe it. But if it is what you think it is, then why do I call it a green tree, a sequoia green tree? And I can use different variations of language to describe the same thing. That's the wideness of the indoctrination. Unfortunately, most of us don't realize how much we peddle that stuff over and over and over again. But they need to challenge the self, hence know thyself, because both of them are programs. And once you realize, then you realize what the observer is. Most of us just talk in words. Like when people say the word God or entity or spirits or demons, they're just saying it in words. It's like the word truth. What is truth? Is it an energy? Is this, and because if you do realize what the energy of truth is, then you must know what the energy of deception is. We fight against not flesh and blood, but principalities. Who's the one that's speaking? Are we the fallen ones? Are we what we call, some people would call demons? Again, these are the things that we just don't bombard ourselves with. And then we entertain. It's like the energy that we use with this English language. It's a meaningful language. It's not like Sanskrit. It's not like Greek. Again, who gave us all the different alchemy of languages? Now, even if people can't grasp that, then how does it affect when you start reading the energy of it? Why is it some people have the ability to play a musical instrument and then they see colors? Well, then that would open up the question, then what do I call red? Again, what is red? It's a word that we use in thoughts. And once people understand what are thoughts, consciousness, are you allowed to question thoughts? Yes. But when you start speaking it, that's a different game now, because now we're talking about sounds and frequencies. Again, this is where people start expanding themselves within what's called the mind. The brain, the upper brain, it sounds like, Kelly, you're using the midbrain. Well done. Because that's where you get intuition, insights, you can start seeing vision and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm the kind of character, I channel shit. But does it serve me? Don't know. I understand health to no end, but do I actually practice it? Probably not, because I realize also at the same time, it's a mortal form. It's like stewarding land. Eventually I can harm it other times, but then I got to also factor, if land gets affected by the luminaries, therefore my vessel must be affected by it. Hence terms like be in the world but not of it, be in the vessel but not of it. We form way too many attachment to this vessel, which is fine, but we don't give enough airspace when it comes to subconscious, spiritual. How does it really work? How do those clouds work? How does the sun and moon hold itself for the durations of all the things that's been recorded? Anyway.
That's why I did the live where I introduced, the quiet self, the subconscious. If you aren't able to quiet the subconscious or get some type of not mastery, but some type of ability to work with the subconscious, to quiet it or to filter what is being received by it, it's constantly going, even in your sleep or other states of mind. The subconscious is constantly absorbing. And it's a quiet observer. It doesn't really say anything. It absorbs everything. And then through cognizant state of the waking state and even dreams, your subconscious then starts projecting all this information back out at you. And I think that people become that interpretation of the subconscious. That's why they've been able to and use social engineering so easily. It's because people leave their subconscious open and unguarded, and they absorb just damn near anything that's thrown at them. And once you start developing a sense of self-development, you kind of need to go to that subconscious quiet place that's just absorbing, that doesn't ever say anything, and start working from that point on out, so that whenever you do receive information, the subconscious has guidelines, maybe. I suppose that's one way of putting it. Or this would be relative, especially to a structure, so that you almost ignore or bypass the garbage, and there's less conflict within self because you're not just sitting around absorbing all these observations and experiences. They're kind of being filtered, but that takes some inward work. What's your take on that? I mean, that's my observation. That's how I've approached my quiet self and try to filter. I mean, do you guys do that at all, or?
Well, Access, we talked about, when I first started coming to you, this has kind of been a process that you, like we talked about, you gave me that structure and that way to do that. And now the way I visualize it and the way that I see it is like you said, it's a sponge that's the subconscious is constantly absorbing all this chatter, all this noise, all this information, all of this stuff, and it can so easily be very bombarding. And if we don't take that time to tap into that quiet self, that to sit there and manually pick through, just like we were talking about the meat and potatoes, to actually sit through and pull through everything, pull out everything, and the ability to identify that which has sustenance and that which doesn't, that which serves me and that which doesn't, that which is freeing to me and that which is trying to enslave me, trying to entrap me to or indoctrinate me into something else that makes me easily manipulable. I think it's that process that now, the more that we do it, of course, like anything else, the more proficient and efficient that we're able to become with it. But I think there's a lot of people that are running around that have absolutely no idea that they have to clear it at some point. Like, if you don't, nobody else is gonna, they don't even want you to know that you have to clear it or that you could clear it. That's what a lot of people don't realize. We talked about it when I first came to you, how I didn't realize how much of a choice that I was forfeiting, how much power I was forfeiting just by letting other people make decisions for me, rather than sitting and bringing it out right here where I can see it with my own eyes and see what's going on with it, and to experiment with that spiritually, to see what it is, to see where that resonates, to see the opportunity for it to play out. It has to reveal itself if you give it enough time. And I think, at least for me now, that's part of my daily process, that I want to at least make sure I have and set aside some time to manually clear that out, because we accumulate a lot of stuff, just like in the car or anything else. When we go through the day to day, we accumulate a lot of stuff that has no value. Like you said, Dom, it's that attachment to the material has absolutely no value or sustenance to anything we're doing. It's not feeding anything. There's no fruit being produced whatsoever. And yet we're spending a whole lot of time and a lot of attachment, a lot of energy to things that don't have any sustenance for us.
Well,
I
as a
call it.
collective- Okay, sorry.
Go, oh, I was just gonna say I call it autopilot. Dom calls it noise. But go ahead, Dom. Please.
I was going to say, if it was such things ever a collective or a group of people, we were spending enormous amount of energy growing our crops, hunting, treating nature the way it is, or intermingling with it, I would say then let's carry on. But since most of us, I'm going to say this very general, but most of us are driving cars, going to somebody else's grocery stores, not respecting the wise that understand solar, lunars, and all that kind of stuff, the luminaries. We're actually making ourselves expendable as a species, in this case, in a human form. So at that point, whoever's ruling this They already know that. Whether they're the ones that broke us, at that point, you have to go in that direction. This is why they talk about transhumanism, metaphysical. Now, in the luminaries, it even shows it, so they must be even aware of that. So, with the concept of Pluto going into Aquarius, it's just an end of something. Hence the Death card. It's the end of something, and it just happens to be humanity. It'd be different if none of us were taking on to this technology. We're not using cars, we're not using cell phones, we're not using TV, and how the radio frequencies and electrical frequencies and the Wi-Fi plays havoc on the physical, like to no end. If all the animals could communicate with us in the plant kingdom, like on a general level that most of us can hear them and understand them, they would realize, yeah, we're being damaged too. Forget about it, that you guys enslave us, call us your pets and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of it. So now, when people start becoming aware of it, you realize, well, the masses are still asleep. They've always been asleep. I've just chosen to wake up. And in that waking up, it's like it's a shit show at that point. Like, oh, okay. And then when we go to these devices, like on YouTube, same with written work. When people used to have all these different variations of book, it's noise at that point because when you put whatever's being preached. I don't care if it's a Muslim, look with the Mecca or the Vatican or all the different isms. When you apply it to the human part, it's not working. It's not even being applied. If anything else, it encourages people that are truly underdeveloped emotionally to rule narcissists, the psychopath, and the sociopath. This is why when I say the child state, and Axis use about regression, yeah, you go back into that cycle. The age, in this case, between 7 and 14, where most of us have not been developed emotionally. And then, of course, you got to factor the first 7 years with the physical. Most of us don't even practice the weaning process. Should a child be drinking milk after the age of 7, and especially from another animal? Probably not. Now, some people say, but it's what? Is it, you're going to tell me it's healthy? Because now we got to look at the duration. Why are most women deficiency? And then you talk about calcium. The whole thing about the medical industry, it's a band-aid out of ignorance. Now, some people might be aware, okay, well, be around an animal. Make sure when you do an operation, you better know where the luminaries are when you're doing that operation. You better know where the luminaries are when you're doing marijuana, or in this case, hemp, or you're doing ayahuasca. But people are so fucking asleep. It's sad. And I get frustrated because I realize I'm only one person. And I classify myself as an observer slash witness. Now, if people value the concept of Jesus, or in this case, Christ consciousness, develop that intellect. Make sure that that emotion is mature. Why? Because you're going to be presented to shit that's going to test you to no end. Whether or not there's an entity out there called the devil, well, then you better start fasting. Why? Because it's going to tap on the fact that you're still attached to food, aren't you? You're still attached to water, aren't you? Aren't you fucking attached to air? That's the game that we play when we come down into this realm. Now, if it's an imprisonment, the question is, what the fuck didn't you do to come back here? That's tough love on oneself. Most people aren't ready to do that kind of shit. I can even say with myself, I might even just be full of shit. But again, shit is fertilizer, and you do need fertilizer when you're planting a seed.
I think what I approached on that here recently was, it seems that everything that has been banished from the heavens always finds itself banished to earth. The fallen ones, the devil, the Nephilim, all these things, and even if you follow the Christian ideal of Adam and Eve, they were banished where? To the realm of earth, out of the garden. And to think that we as beings are somehow not a part of that and have been banished to this type of containment, you know, that that to me would make us a unicorn. Um, because everything else that seems to be excluded from the heavens or other realms that seem to be more functional, Earth seems to be the place where the dysfunctional get dumped off. Any feelings on that? that's a hard hit, and that's putting you in the place that, as Dom said, what did you do to get here? If this is a place for those that are exiled or those that need to be contained, what did you do to get here? And is that even a question that you've ever asked yourself? Or have you just decided that you're privileged above all other entities to be the grandiose of Earth, and we didn't do anything to get put here with all these prisoners and uh, diverse and adversarial entities and energies? I happen to think that this is a place of containment, possibly even exiled.
Well, this realm, in my interpretation, acts as being anchored. We just happen to be casualty. Somebody has to rule over the trees, over the water, over the mountains. There has to be rulers for those things. Maybe the ones that lose, maybe we'll call them demigods or gods. They lose in the card game. Okay, so you got to take care of humans. Okay, that's your joke. It's one of those things where, again, people just don't challenge the self, literally the self. When I hear people say self-love, I said it should be love the self or challenge the self, not the other way around, where the self is the child. But again, the self might be just be interpreted as the vessel. When people do body consciousness, they're communicating with the vessel. And it's trying to tell you something. Okay, I don't need to eat this type of food. I don't want that medicine. Why? Because there's not enough actually true medicine plant inside of that chemical induced pill. But it's the best situation. I said, no, you're going to probably do a lot of side effects with that. And again, this is where when I hear people say, I'm a doctor, I said, you're just a fucking teacher. But for who? No different than a physician. You're a healer. For who? I'm not taking away the fact that humans have learned, when you do surgery, that's a great ideal. But when are you doing the surgery? Who's in that room? Has everybody been cleansed? Not just physically. It's like when people talk about diets, got to make sure we have that physical, emotional, and mental diet together. So a lot of us are, if not most of us, are dysfunctional from within. And shoot, access to meet that person, you might intuitively know that person's done a lot of work, but to me, like I like using the word too. It's a unicorn. It's a rarity to meet somebody that understands certain days you eat certain types of foods. You got to make sure that the sun and the moon are here. Got to make sure that because some people might even understand, especially the Africans, that some of them still understand. You guys still doing the 7-day cycle? Because we're still doing the 10-day cycle. Hence the son and the father ideal. Once we come down into these forms, we all just go to sleep. And some people come back here to assist others. Other people come here just to say, well, I know what's right. I said, you're still playing the right and wrong game? I thought you needed directions. Right or left might help. And even that, are you using your upper hemispheres? Are you your upper brain? Are you using your lower brain? We're not hearing enough of that. And even when it does get written, people start putting poo-poo. Oh, that's theosophy. That's esoteric. That's masonry. That's Rosicrucians. That's woo-woo. That's the stuff from the Quran. That's from the Bhagavad Gita. I said, do you really understand what the written work does? No. And at that point, those people, especially if you do enough pushback, they'll get all defensive and attack. I said, you're still in the childlike state, meaning that you're still a child. You don't understand. And if you do understand, then you can apply discernment. Knowledge is just a child to all of this information. I can know something, doesn't mean I understand it, let alone have discernment. But once you have discernment, you realize, interesting. And then when people start pushing back on me, I said, how interesting. A self-absorbed person makes it about me when they've never been challenged. I would hope that they challenge themselves, literally challenge the self. And how do you challenge it? In thoughts. But
I think
get.
Go ahead, Tom.
At this point, I get most of us, okay, let's just deal with the elements of the physical. So how does the heart function? What goes to the heart? Can we communicate with the blood? Probably, if the person has that ability. Not everybody can do the reading of blood when you get an organ transplant. So
I think that natural state that you're discussing there was utilized, if there is such thing as history, and if that history is any indication of what we were as a species, I don't think that they were blinded by all the little tools and technology. I think that they still had a firm grasp on, yeah, this is going to be the sign and the shared state that we're going to perform this operation, because all the energies are lined up for this to perpetuate itself in a positive and more beneficial way. And the further we go into removing ourselves from being in touch with the luminaries, localized energy, um, we've removed ourselves as a species from what naturally kind of perpetuated us into states of Christ consciousness, maybe, um, a higher sense of self-being. And I think that people like you, me, Kelly, that's still applicable to what we're endeavoring in, is being able to see past the toys and the gadgets and the advertisements and the influences and the subconscious influences, and taking a inward introspective look all the way to the child, the inner child, the fetal years, all the way up until you start engaging yourself into whatever complexity you decide to add on to yourself. And when I let go, and the more that I let go, the easier it was for me to experience these energies as a flow. And you could almost feel them. To now, I can feel the luminaries. I can feel when there's an alignment. I can feel the cycles of the moon. Because I gave up the calendar and I gave up the clock on the wall. And slowly but surely, I started giving up all these different things that I had piled on myself, that I was taught and programmed at an early age to submit myself to. And I like to think that our endeavors, especially as energy workers, is that we're bringing that sense of being in touch with the natural state of things, such as what was apparent, throughout history, that earlier ages of our species were definitely in touch with. I don't know if you ascribe to where we were as a species at that time, or whether, that was even presented to us correctly. But I think that it holds a traditional root, and it only shows up through, I can't even say what triggers or bonds one to start recognizing that nature within themselves and to utilize it as a practical life skill. I'm not sure, Dom. I don't think we've ever discussed where you began your journey into understanding or recognizing that energy was much more than just a feeling. It actually has an effect.
Well, the kink came when I got a divorce. I think that just kind of accumulated. Prior to that, I had numerous bouts of depressions. I used to sedate myself with, with sports and other things like TV and all that. Whether I was gathering information, don't know. And then me being in the presence of, in this case, Judith, and when she used to teach all that at the apartment, I just noted it all. The fact that I trust her enough to say whatever she's doing, there must be some validity to it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not always into like proving anything, but I will note those things, hence chakras. So I would say probably the 90s for me, if I'm going to put like a date to it, like in the 90s. And again, if I probably go back and realize, okay, where were all the luminaries lined up? So that plays a role. I think we can't really force the will. I know people like to use the word free will. That's just usually just lack of accountability when people usually say that shit. But people try to force their will. It's,
Right.
you
What
can't.
about you, Kelly? I'm sorry, Dom. If
No,
you're
no,
not done, please carry forward.
I was just going to say it's just sometimes people, they try to force their will again with a system that they don't truly understand. So that's why we used to have people that were classified as wise, and we realized no, that endeavor is not going to work. You want to have a war, no problem. I'm not here to judge that, but would you like to work with the energy opposed to fighting the energies? So again, everything has to do with just observing those things. But if again, a lot of people want to just experience this, you observe way more than you will ever experience. Because once you start classifying the words that you use, the emotions that you express, when it manifests itself into the physical, yeah, that's a linear experience. But when we start realizing thoughts are, we're always using them. And when I say that, I could say the word tree, and we could be in a location, you both will look at that, so you're receiving some from somewhere, hence Kabbalah, that word, but I'm the one that's speaking it, so that's affecting my vessel. But also, since I'm speaking the word, therefore now it's sounds and frequencies, opposed to when you're looking at the written work, whether it's left to right or right to left. It's like when people use writing skills. You'll get different outputs when you write with your right hand opposed to your left hand. Anyway, yeah, that's access.
I think that's an observation worth taking in. And I think it does make a difference how you receive information. What about you, Kelly? I mean, what's your take on this being a kind of being able to be in touch with something that was obviously utilized in our history, but only rears its head through uh, certain nodes or people. Do you feel that this is maybe you're carrying on a line of learning that is least taught?
I do. In all honesty, it has a very grounding effect to me because, in a lot of ways, me coming to understand that was me running from the calling on my life, running from what I ultimately know that and not even, I guess, what I ultimately know I'm here to do, but what I choose to actively show up and do. Like Dom talked about, that discretion, that discernment, that once you begin this process of reckoning yourself and then breaking down everything, it's not just it begins with challenging yourself, but it also encompasses challenging everything else. When I started to learn that I could be a sponge, but then also be selective in what I don't have to absorb all of that just because you put it out there. No, I don't have to receive that. And so for me, that was the culmination of using and being able to understand discernment, to understand discretion. Yes, I could do anything. Yes, there's all this infinite possibility. But what is it that I choose and desire to pull out of there, and why? What is that motivation behind it, that intention behind it? I think that all of these things start to play an enormous impact. But for me, it feels very grounding to know that I'm a part of this, that for whatever reason that I have been chosen in some kind of way. And to kind of loop back a little bit on what we were talking about, on Earth being a place of exile or place of hell, or any of those variations of that same narrative, that same possibility. I don't know, but I think that's an opportunity for us all to have that reckoning with ourselves and with everything that we've been taught. That, like Dom said, it starts with challenging those thoughts. All of this stuff, just because it's there doesn't mean it's of any sustenance. And so it starts with challenging all of that. And in the course of doing that, then it starts to, okay, now I have the capacity, that emotional ability for me to handle and be resilient enough that I can handle confronting and challenging myself without it being and pushing me into an identity crisis or anything else. That I can do that and still have that stability. I'm going to use the analogy like being in, because most of my experiences here lately have been in being in the gym and learning how to tap into that, and follow that physically with what I have going on mentally and spiritually. But it's that for me, when I first got in the gym, I thought all of these different problems or different areas in my body that were weak, and it was really just my core that I wasn't learning to tighten up, and it was not giving me the stability in all these other areas. So I'm seeing that manifest as all these other different problems, but really it was just that I lacked that stability. And now I think that we all, the more that we practice and wrestle with those things, the things that challenge us, the things that challenge the people around us, the thing, any of those things, whatever that application looks like, it just keeps tightening that muscle, and we just continue to increase our stability in that way, our way and ability to receive information. Now that you're used to challenging everything, now it's not an attack on me. Those defense mechanisms you talked about, Don, don't start to come out, and now you're not projecting all this, oh, and now the problem has to be me because now I'm hitting all of this, all of these areas, these, yeah, oh yeah, I'm drawing that out of you. But I don't know, I just see it all coming into fruition. But there's so many factors, like we've talked about, Access, so many variables that are involved in that. And it to me, at least, the more that I pursue, the more that I learn, the more that I realize how much I still have to learn.
We're always students, and we're to claim you're a master of something is, well, you just set your limitation, and no, you won't ever be a master of it because you stop being a student of it. And it takes years for one to develop that understanding with some, because they think that there's a pinnacle point where it tops off, and suddenly they have a full spectrum of it. When in actuality, you're right. We're continual students and continually on an endeavor with some of us to broaden and widen our perspective and our interpretation, and to know that there's a difference between projecting your feelings, emotions, or thoughts on another person like a mirror that's reflected back to you, but taking some personal accountability for the fact that maybe the problem lies with you, and maybe you should go back to being a student with all potentials and possibilities open to you, than to thinking that you've achieved the pinnacle and now suddenly you're a master of life, which I've noticed a lot of people in social media and platforms kind of take on that role as if they're the be all end all of whatever topic it is that their channel is based on. And I don't see that, and I don't feel that way. That's why I like to keep open-endedness with this platform, is because it's going to be perpetual, and it's never ending. And this is just information on your path and journey through this experience. And fortunately, I've had excellent people to be able to share this with and share this experience with on this platform and this channel. I just don't think that everyone's ready for, especially what Dom, you, or I have to offer. And to those that do, may it serve them well. But this is just a step, and I don't, I don't claim to be the pinnacle of anything, but I do appreciate the people that I've got to grow with here. And that's why, especially today's stream was, meant so much, because, I'm able to present on this platform to people that have endeavored to question themselves and to question their their application to the life experience. And I think that both of you have great things to offer, but that's just that's just on information on your continual journey. I don't see this as a state of being able to solidify anything into a state of it's finished, even with a piece of artwork. Just because you decide to just stop and call that piece of artwork finished doesn't mean that that piece of artwork is finished. It's just that's where you chose to stop. Thus, the measurement of a person. And I'm sure Dom's very aware of it, as I know you are, Kelly, that people give away the measurement of themselves when they start putting up safety protocols and resistance to what you have to offer, though it's just information.
If I can share access, and I compliment a little bit on both years. Um, I guess Kelly was picking up intuitively, and she shared out loud how I was actually giving information. I am a projector. So thank you, Kelly, for putting it out there, whether you knew it, but I think you did pick that up. And Access, you reinforced it. I'm kind of like the dog that just barks in the park. I don't have teeth. I'm not a manifester per se. I forget what you are, Access. I don't think you're a manifester, but maybe you can share again. But I'm just a projector. So I'm just projecting, and plus I don't have my emotions developed. So I come across, if people hear it, it's like, oh, he's angry. I said, to a certain point, I am. But I also know to waver back to just being calm and realizing it doesn't need to be spoken. But when I do, it comes across that way, and it's a part of me. But also, other people probably can relate to it. They just don't know how to say it openly. I said, okay, I'll be the one that puts my hands on the stove then, so everybody else can just be the observer of it. So, thanks, guys.
Yeah, Kelly, you can speak better on this for yourself than I could, but I think that that is a place that Kelly observes from, and she recognizes that just by observing somebody else doing the act, she gets the information from it and the learned experience through just the observation. Go
Well,
ahead,
we talked
Kelly.
about we talked about it. We used the same analogy, Dom, that you just used. I said out my own mouth that shit at this point in time, anything I can learn with I don't have to be the one to put my hand on the stove. I'm cool with that. I done did that so many times. I am so okay with not being the person put my hand on the stove. I can
You,
watch you do that and yeah, notice my dumbass don't need to be doing it.
you don't need the practice.
Eh,
That's what I tell people. You don't need the
eh,
practice.
yeah, exactly. I don't need to be the one to no, I don't need to know that to realize that that has value. You know what I'm saying? I don't want have to be the one to experience that lesson in order for me to try and attribute value to the lesson that you learned, you know. It's just it's so interesting that I don't know, it's just so interesting. I'm so glad we did this. In all honesty, like Dom, I want to thank you for your time, and of course, Access. You know what we do, but I really do. I want to thank you guys for your time, and it's funny, Dom, that you brought up what you did when you did, because I think, in all honesty, that's a way that, and something that I'm realizing here. I would say over the last course of the last year of my life that I'm very good at. I can identify, okay, you said, for example, let me clarify a little bit on where I'm going, help you guys jump with me here. But you said that the way that you communicate, sometimes you see that underdevelopment coming through in the way that you express your emotions, that comes across angry. Axis does it the same way. Y'all y'all two peas in a pod, because he does the exact same thing. And this is what I had to realize, that I could meet you in that. I could realize, and when I started realizing not only this about myself, when I start realizing, oh yep, there's that 5-year-old rearing its head right now, we throwing a tantrum. I could realize that, and that's part of what facilitated Access and I building the relationship that we have today, both professionally and personally, because I realized that when he was having those moments, I knew it. Okay, here you go. Here's your 5-year-old. There's a need, underlying need that's being not being met, and that's just the way you're vocalizing that. That's the way you're externalizing. That's the way you're communicating that. And Dom, it's just interesting to me that you said that, because that, like, I've always been able to see past that. I know there's something you're not, nobody is doing all that just to do all that. That doesn't make any sense. There's no point in expending all that energy on nothing. So there's something still being said, that's trying to be communicated. We just gotta understand and get on that same level. That's why I tell Access all the time, let me know where you're at so I can meet you there. And then I'll help lead and direct us into a more peaceful, a more balanced place. But I gotta first know where you're at in order to determine the path to get out of that. If it's even something that we need to, or is it something that we need to pour into? Let me contribute my energy, and we'll continue proceeding on this journey on a positive direction, whichever way that may go.
Yeah, that was something that I was so grateful because Kelly was kind of she thought she was alone in a sense because people she wasn't around the right type of people that were able to understand the workings of energy and a maturity of the soul, the being, and the mind. And they had almost broke her down by her seeking to feel relevant to other people, but yet still being ostracized because of who she is and these gifts that she has. And now that she sees them as gifts, I've watched them just blossom and bloom along the way. That's why, bringing her into this, and she is going to be starting her own platform. She already has a social media presence, but she's going to grow that, and maybe she'll allow other people that was in her state of being almost self isolated because there was nothing familiar about other people, and now she's getting to see that no, she's not alone, and she's she's surrounded by the few. There's not that many of us, but the ones of us that are, we're not oddballs. We're not, you know, different to the point where we should be excommunicating ourselves because we think or feel differently, but we should develop and grow that. And now that she's been exposed to like this community, now she'll have free reign to be able to interact with this community, and they'll know who and what she is. She can experience other people's journeys and what they have to offer that kept her kind of ostracized from being able to fully experience the gifts that she has and how it works with other people. So, I have a lot of appreciation for her in that area. And it was so quick. I mean, you know, she recognized immediately that it wasn't a disease, it wasn't a mental illness, it wasn't that she was the odd person out. It's just that she hadn't been exposed to people of the same nature and of the same like-mindedness. So,
Access, if I can jump in real quick, I don't mean to cut you off, but I wanna help connect this with something else too that we've been talking about both together and that we mentioned this morning too. What I would say for that, for me, in that time, in that area of my life, all the people that I was surrounded by, the scale that they are using to measure themselves and that they're bound by, I realized they were projecting so much of that onto me that I didn't realize that process to how to tangibly pull that apart and decide what was for me. I didn't. I was being bound, thinking that I was too much because I don't. I exceed the scale that you've set in all these different areas and measures. And for so long, I internalized that, thinking there's something wrong with me, something that is lacking, or because I don't have the same skill set as most people that you tend to see, and that's a generalization, of course, but I don't. And instead of, like you said, as soon as I started embracing that as a gift, as soon as I started running from that, well, it is what it is. These things, what am I going to choose to do with them? Okay, now I could choose to do them to affect people. I personally can speak to, in my life, how the right information, it's not about the information, but how you apply the information. The right information could change your life. It has the possibility to do that. And at the right time, that for me, as I begin to branch out and build my own channel, that is part of my desire, my intention in establishing that and begin.
Uh-oh. Ah, sorry about that.
She'll be back. Welcome back,
I'm
Kelly.
back again.
Welcome back, Kelly.
As soon as I pop out, I'm right back in. But as I move forward, I'm excited because I know there's other people out there like us. We're not the only 3 on the planet that got no. That's not the case. And so as I branch out and reach out into mine, I right now I'm still using TikTok. I have not started posting videos yet on YouTube, but that's going to be coming soon. And so you can definitely look forward to that. You can find me at Kelly Kells, KELLY KELLS 5466 on any of my platforms. You can check me out, see what's going on. But I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to do this and continue to do this, because for me it's really, I'm watching it change my life as I walk through it. I have a different perspective than both of you, I think, because while a lot of these abilities I've had most of my life, I just never knew how to really use them, how to harness, how to make them, like Dom, like you talked about before, how to make that energy work for me. I'm sitting here trying to come up with that, trying to use my own energy, trying to plug it in, and I'm realizing I didn't have to. There's a whole different way to go about doing this, and I'm seeing it happen right before my eyes, and so I'm excited to share that with you guys as things continue to go too, and move forward.
And I know for myself, that's much appreciated because we are small in number and we're small in community. But I think that even with this, it's building a community that people may not truly feel comfortable with what they are or what their potentials could be. And the more that this community can grow and the more that there's like-mindedness and a maturity of the being, uh, the more beneficial that I see this. And you've got all my support definitely for your endeavors in that channel. And I know that the people that have been to this channel and have stuck with me or beside me, uh, it's been a blessing because I consider them a part of a very small community that has great potential if people are willing to do the work and the introspection. And to see another platform blossom off that is just that makes my endeavors worthwhile. And the fact that me, you, and Dom can share up here, um, maybe something that could be basic to someone else or advanced to others. It's it's a mutual communication on the same vibration, maybe different in form, but it still says the same thing. And I hope that people get to experience what you did, Kelly, with coming to terms with it's a gift.
I'm still here, Axis and Kelly.
just checking. For me, it was once I got past my hedonism, um, my endeavors to fulfill my comforts and my desires, and to pursue indulgences that were only satisfying to me. And I went through a sabbatical and a hiatus, and that's whenever I come to the understanding that you're covering up the the true essence of your being and what you're capable of doing whenever you start pursuing these personal endeavors for comfort only. And the I think Dom will understand where I'm coming from. This is, and you Kelly. I mean, even though you're getting the good end of a feeling, there is that opposite spectrum which has to bring balance to things. So you have to go to these uncomfortable places and experience these uncomfortable things and get past the safety protocols. And once you've done that, then you allow the possibility for greater experiences of joy, understanding. But you gotta also understand, from my perspective, that there's a gravel road that you're going to be drugged down before you get to the paved road. And that's the same with driving the paved road. I had it easy, and then I got drugged through the gravel, and then suddenly I realized this is a gift, you know, um, and to exploit it and utilize it for my personal gain and endeavors usually wound up more detrimental to me than beneficial. Um, what's been your experience with that, Kelly? Did was it easy for you at first in life, and then it became hard, then you understood it as a gift, or did you have to travel that gritty road before you found pavement and understood it as a gift?
I definitely was in the second boat. Um, it has not always been paved road all the way. No, sometimes I'm struggling trying to figure out. Hang on, there's hardly any gravel here. Where the road pick up? That's what it felt like at the time. But it on the other side of that, it's that like I keep going back to that pursuit of something more. And I had in the pursuit of something more for me is in the pursuit of God. I found so much evidence in my life and my experiences, especially when I was in college, that if you told me that the world was hell that we was living in, in all honesty, I really couldn't argue with you with it because I have all this evidence that I've seen of all this hellish behavior that's been in and around me, all this corruption of something that was once true and beautiful. And so it for me that you know what I'm saying when we first talked about that wasn't a huge revelation, but when I started sitting in that I had to learn because I had got to a point where things had got so bad that I was comfortable being numb. I didn't want to I didn't have the capacity anymore to feel anything because everything hurt. If I start feeling any of it, I'm feeling all of it and it hurts. And so for me, I had to learn as a skill to literally sit here in my discomfort because it was in those moments I noticed that when I tried to sit in it, that I felt the most pull to go anywhere and everywhere else, to do anything. My impulsivity would be the highest in those moments when I'm trying to sit there in it. And this has not been something that happened overnight or I just woke up and poof, one day I know how to sit still for a minute and start to process my shit. No, that's not how it happens at all. I just started to make conscious effort to sit here in it, even if I can only sit here for 2 minutes. and feel everything, I have to sit there and feel that for 2 minutes. And now it's gotten to the point where, in combination with that, in the combination that the resolve in myself that I was not going to continue to allow myself to lie to me. I couldn't be the one continuing to perpetuate a lie, continuing to support and not challenge thoughts that I knew were lies, that I had been programmed to believe my whole life. I had to choose to break that down, that I was willing to actually look in the mirror and see whatever there is to see about Kelly, regardless of whether it's something I want to be seen, whether it looks good, any of it. It's not about that. Like, I had to be willing to sit there and just see all of it for what it is, for what it ain't, regardless of my interpretation on it. And I found that when I did that, all of those indulgences, like you said, those indulgences, it's a way to cover up. It just the same way that anger expressed is something, a need not being met that is trying to be expressed. It works the other way, that we sometimes we try and hide and mask and put that over there. It's the same process of projecting. Yeah, redirect the attention anywhere but where it's uncomfortable. And so for me, those processes went hand in hand. Sitting in the discomfort became a process for me of bringing all these different factors and things, indulgences, to my attention. And then from there, I had the opportunity to take all this knowledge and wisdom that I was learning from all these other different areas in my life, of things I was studying, and use, okay, a combination of factors, my own. Let me reason through it myself. Let me add and do the math myself, so that I know whatever decision I make is a conscious one. That for me is what it has to be. It kind of makes me think on what you touched on, Dom, earlier, that right or wrong, I had to let that go. And right or left, it is what it is. The GPS don't send you back home every single time that you get lost, in order for it to recalculate a route for you to get where you were originally trying to go. No, that's not how it works. It bases a route off of your current destination. Even if you detoured 3-4 times, it constantly is updating your location to keep redirecting you back to whatever that goal is. And so I think when you start putting all these pieces together, that for me at least was where I started to see the most headway and see the most opportunity to lean into it. Hang on, I don't have to keep fighting this energy. This is energy that I can use not only to my advantage, because when I say my advantage, it's not just me. It's all the people that I represent, all the people, all the stories that I have seen, experienced, lived, everything along this way. And it's not even just that. I feel like it's a torch that was passed to me. And for a long time, I spent a lot of time trying to honestly duck off, like, if you could pass the torch to somebody else, that would be cool. And it was sitting here like, oh well, guess what? There's still nobody picking it up, still nobody picking it up, still nobody picking it up. And I came to a place in myself like, well shit, if it's gotta be me, then what the hell am I sitting here waiting? What are you waiting for? Literally, what are you waiting for? And that for me has been the biggest accelerant to my growth. Like, I don't know. I kind of got a little bit on a tangent, but that's where what I was feeling in my energy right there.
that's that's fine. Yeah, I think people kind of neglect the growth of themselves and what they're capable of exceeding by trying to avoid the the rocky road, or not finding the value in a turbulent situation, which is sometimes more educational than a peaceful situation. Everybody talks about, especially on multimedia, vibing, or vibing high, or being in a good vibe, or you're not my vibe. Well, in actuality, it's that turbulent endurance of being in an uncomfortable place that teaches you just as much, if not more, than being in a comfortable place with a bunch of people that uh, sharing the same drug. You know, you're all on that same level. You're on that same trip. But where's the growth? It takes just one person to step outside of that comfort zone to start sparking innovation and ideals, and especially amongst their peers. I take a lot of effort in doing that because I'll touch places and things that other people won't, and I'll go places where other people dare not. But I find that most of my growth is in those areas and in that discomfort, and it's just it's as much a resource and a value as trying to cover yourself up in pleasures or self satisfaction. Um, I think that if more people were to face those harder situations that they've had to endure instead of burying, suppressing, or sweeping them under the rug, that for the individual personal growth would come much easier. I've had to face a lot of things that I didn't want to face about even about myself and my environment. But those were the states of real growth, and they were very uncomfortable. Um, I'm not sure from your perspective, Dom, but I know there had to be a at some point a reckoning with yourself that brought you to understand that there's just as much value in the discomfort as there's the comfort. Polarity.
Well, I know I'm still caught up in my comforts, but like I've done in past, and I still do it. I entertain ideals. So when I just have that moment of aha, it's like, fuck, sorry my language. What do I do with that? And then when I try to share with other people, that's because I'm trying to be the student. I'm like, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt that, oh, you guys must all know this, and I'm just a fool that's catching on board. But then I get a lot of pushback in some areas, not always. I can't say that all the time, but in some areas, I'm like, how do I explain it now? This goes back to my analogy of if we met aliens, how would we explain it to other people? It's challenging, So when I hear even Kelly and you Axis talk, I can relate to some of that, and plus I've also downloaded all kinds of information. Where when I hear other people, their type of awareness or sharing is doesn't really lead anywhere. Like it's just like, okay, so it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, like a form of insanity. So when people talk about the spirit or energy and how to manipulate it or how to work with it, I'm intrigued by that. Maybe I'm very receptive to that kind of stuff, where other people don't realize, that there's almost a mechanism trying to protect them from that. Now they might call it a demon that's resistant. No, I said, well, that could be you. So, but I've had a lot of those aha moments, access without me deviating too far in another area. And I just try to note it, and I'm like, okay, so what do I do with that? A lot of times it's not even about doing anymore. It's just about being. So that's where I realized the experiencer opposed to the observer. Just observe it for what it is, Dom. If I was a seer, I might be, and I knew that things were going to happen in the future and it's going to be very harmful for somebody or even pleasant, I would have to take in more information. Dom, they're going to still do what they're going to do. So then why would you interfere? Bingo. Why would I interfere? Unless there's other people, and if there's children involved, in this case, me sharing with you guys, it's being recorded. So I don't really know where this is going. But if it was a private conversation, it would just stay there. So then I would realize, okay, I know the people I'm around.
I can relate. I definitely relate to that. I know that we get met with a lot of resistance. Uh, I've seen the way that people meet me with disdain or acceptance, and the same, with you, Dom, that you get met with disdain or acceptance, but they're not looking at the fact that it's just information. We're just the conduit of that information. And whether we're privy to that type of information or whether it's just a common tongue that's no longer spoken, there's still a uncomfortable safety protocol that people put up to keep themselves from having to experience or to deal with those extreme possibilities. And I work really hard to take down safety protocols, and it's my exposure to the unknown or the more broadened states of things and how they're perceived that I find to be to my benefit of growth. And it wasn't the safety protocol that was benefiting me. Actually, it was restraining me from information that I could utilize and bring into my life experience. I know we all work with our different variables of safety protocol, and some more than most. But I think those have to be worked with. And for true growth, you have to kind of push those safety protocols to a safe limit, for some, and then exceed past the looping, past the redundancy of hitting that safety protocol, going back to start, hitting that exact same protocol, going back to start, and just kind of either removing or pushing the boundaries of that personal safety protocol that's been conditioned into you, that kind of keeps you in that state of being able to be even socially engineered. If you don't go past the safety protocols, then social engineering is easy because they done got you figured out. All they got to do is just keep feeding you the candy, and in many cases it's the dopamine hits of a cell phone, or others it's a drug, some it's TV, but anything to reinforce and keep you in safe bounds, I think, is the objective of social engineering. But then you have anomalies like Eli and Kelly that test those bounds and move those bounds and scoot those safety protocols to the side to kind of free yourself from their control and their ideals, because you start developing a sense of self-thought and self-recognition, and you determine for yourself then what the future may look like for you and not what they want it to be for you. I think that's I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Part of the looping is because there's a defensive attack mechanism going on with our comforts. So a lot of us, that kind of first impression is lasting impression, or that constant programming. And then eventually most of us said, well, I can't do nothing. I said, well, you're always doing something. Or I can't change things. Well, change is always occurring. To input a different word, for most people, they just don't want to put or entertain different types of programs within the program. So that's where a lot of people loop. And that's why some people, they rather do the backbiting and not realizing how much that affects the heart, because it's very impressionable when it comes to one's heart, because there's memory to it through the blood. So again, I've talked to you openly about this axis, and for the first time probably sharing with Kelly. She's probably already aware of this stuff, but I'm going to share anyway, where unless a person is willing to challenge that program is constantly running out of ignorance, and most people are going to feed it. It's like when a person says, so how does it serve you knowing that somebody else is being abused? Well, it doesn't do nothing for me. I said, no, you're not being abused. But how does it serve you by observing somebody else being abused or hearing somebody else being abused, let alone hearing somebody that's well off? How does that serve you? Without getting into what the you is with them. bring it down to a level that they can at least entertain first, because it's almost like baby steps. You almost have to fake it till you make it with myself, let alone with them. And this is why when people say, I never get stressed, I said, you probably always are stressed. It's just not what goes in your mouth, it's what's around you, or in this case, thoughts. We are receiving things. There's a reason, if I'm going to use the word reason, why we have technology like Wi-Fi, or in this case, a cell phone. It has many receivers. The vessel has many receivers. Which one is being ignored? Which one is being overemphasized? You have people that have groups called about understanding. I said, okay, but what happened to understand when it comes to the tree of life? Understanding is talking about you're led by the heart. Is the heart functioning correctly? Meaning that what's going to it? And have you been taught morality? Are you consistent in the way you think and how you act? It's challenging. That's a word I could use for most situations. It's challenging.
which applies to the kind of the uncomfortable. Um, what was it like for you, Kelly, whenever you realized that there was this perpetual looping, and instead of it being a curse, your recognition of it suddenly became an awareness, a survival skill, a life tool, and you were able to utilize that, and you kind of jumped out of that perception of continual looping and seeking to make forward progress.
For me, once I realized, like consciously realized that I was looping as much as I was doing, like I was seeing all these different areas. Now, mind you, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a backstory on some of my story. When I left home and went to college, I was so like just excited. I've always maintained my very childlike excitement to see the world, like that, just over bubbly, just excited to see what all is out here. And when I went off to college, I went with such high hopes, and I not only saw so much trauma manifested and transpire in the time when I was in college, but I was processing and trying to make sense of all this programming from my entire life, and what I'm taking stock in my life and trying to figure out what in the hell is going on, because this shit is out of control. Like, just jumped in the deep end and I'm struggling to swim right now. Like, that was very much what that process looked like for me. And so in the course of all of this, and sorting through the shit, where, okay, what Dom, I keep coming back to this because I love what you said about challenging thoughts. Like, for me, that was where a lot of my work that I do in my own personal time, that's where I spend my work, because I continually have to bring up, and I visualize, like, at this process of sticking your hand in the mud or whatever and pulling it out and literally uncovering from the gunk, washing it off, and seeing what the hell you're actually looking at, and then deciding consciously where I'm gonna put that in my life. How much value do I attribute to it? What where can I use this to serve me? And if I can't, then I'm gonna learn something from it, because I can always learn something from it, and then learn to detach and move around from shit that it doesn't belong to me. When I started doing that, that's when things started to change.
I noticed, ah, there we go, I touched the wrong button. Um, I noticed whenever I stopped trying to create the same experience, because it was generally um, pleasurable or self-indulgent experiences, and I was trying to duplicate that, and I would loop that signal out to people, and those that were receptive and respondent to it is kind of what I drew in. And they kind of fed that pursuit of self indulgence. And I kept myself within a realm of people that were of that same lightness and that same energy. And when I broke free of that, you have to take an individual stance at one point. And I noticed that metaversally here on the internet, that you can identify that with different platforms and people. They will take on the looping energy of whatever the chat or whatever the panel is offering, or the host, just to stay in relevancy with that type of peer group. And my breaking away from that and becoming completely uh, individualized in the fact that I'm not going to go with the flow of just what people are thinking and saying is where I met the most resistance, but was also able to see people much more for what they were and experience them for what they are, more so than my perception of them. Did you find that change to be applicable to what you experienced, Kelly?
I definitely did. I definitely did. When I started looking at my own shit and coming to the realization, like, I cannot keep doing the same thing, because if I keep doing the same thing, I'm going to continue to get the same result, and this is not working for me. When I started sitting in that and started realizing, okay, this is not sustainable. This is not going to get me anywhere but right here, stuck spinning my wheels in the mud. Like, once I realized that, then I started to take stock and take inventory of all these different areas in my life, and trying to identify where they belonged. But then also, when I started seeing myself clearly, it was like that same process. Then I started applying to when I saw other people. Now that I have this understanding and what I'm learning about myself and the loop that I tend to run on sometimes, that all of these different areas that I haven't, if I haven't been there, I would say, like, revisited that time and reparented. We talked about that before, Access. You know, that word that we like, reparented that time, then I'm going to continue to run on that same loop. And when I realized that about myself and could see how freaking desperate and pathetic I am sometimes when I run on some of the same loops. Like, come on now, Kelly. Like, we know that. Come on, what are we doing right now? Like, going back to my those moments with myself in grace, meeting myself in those moments, and then learning how to, okay, yeah, I met you in there, but this is not where we're about to stay. Come on, we're gonna go somewhere else. I'm gonna lead you into something different. We're gonna find and create something different. This is not the way it has to be. And now I take that same approach when I'm dealing with people, because I understand. Now I can see it very quickly. Oh, this is just a tantrum coming out. This, I'm seeing it. You're processing it at the same time I'm processing it. And so it changed so much of the way that I see now. Now I have to release people of the projection of what I wanted or hoped they would be or anything else. No, you're constantly growing, evolving. All these possibilities all exist. And I realized the same scale that I was putting myself to, I was subjecting everybody else around me to. So in the process of me releasing that, it's creating this beautiful space for people to really flourish. And unfortunately, some of those plants die, and it is what it is. That's where you determine exactly the ones that had roots and, a system to to sustain over time. You determine whether those were there or not. But that's what makes me so excited about all of this moving forward, is because it's leaning more into this than I ever have. So I'm really excited about that as well.
I will say it's been amazing watching your growth and being able to share that here on this platform. You know, it solidifies my endeavor and makes it a worthwhile experience that I can really relate to. Uh, I've seen some pretty profound things dropped into to chat that I know, certain people are picking up on, especially in Dom's arena when he drops something profound in a chat and it's met with opposition. You know, these people are identifying themselves for the mark and measure that they are. That's as far as they're going to go, and even that they're resistant to. And then you have those that are receptive, and then you have those that just don't, just aren't capable of reaching that point of understanding. And I think that for me, it was when I identified whether they understand it or not, or whether they're getting it or not, I can't let that stifle my growth as an individual observer, an individual being. And I'm not going to let their limitations become my limitations. And I wanted to really get that across to people. And that's, when me and Dom originally started out with the live streaming that we do, I think that was one of the approaches that we kind of had in mind is, we're not going to allow them to limit the possibilities of, just becoming aware of self or doing the work. And it's been fruitful for me. What's been your experience with this adventure so far, Dom? Because I'm very very satisfied with our endeavors so far.
Well, the live channels have been kind of challenging for me still, just because it's more of a group, even though we narrowed it down to a couple of people. For me to have a private conversation with a couple of people, it's a different kind of thing. And from my experience, when it comes to YouTube, listening to somebody that has a presentation like a podcast, it favors me. But to interact with somebody, it's better one-on-one, or at least a couple of folks opposed to a whole group of people, because then it becomes noise for me. I'm not well suited to have a conversation. Let's say I was talking with Kelly or you in a restaurant when there's a whole bunch of noise. I'm easily distracted that way. I can't stay focused. But that's what I know of myself. As far as how some people are communicating or how they're sharing with each other on these panels, I think I think you kind of said it, Axel. It reveals where we're at. And I take on that energy too. And then that's why I come across the way I talk sometimes. So.
Well, I know from the response and the feedback that I get, whether it's platitude or it's genuine, the ones that are receptive to what we offer and what we discuss, so far has outweighed any of the negative. And with that, that's even more reason to persevere with this, because I know that somebody's getting it somewhere, or at least it's helping them in that self-discovery or broadening. And that to me was kind of the goal, I think, and I'm still trying to meet that goal, and will, as long as this platform runs, of offering offering actual tools that can be put to use, whether it be coping or self-discovery or whatever. I think that our original ideal has definitely stood the test of what time we've been here. We've seen platforms come and go, and we've seen them change, and we've watched them cover the same ground just in a different light over and over and over. And I'm just glad that I'm able to recognize that and recognize that in others. I, you know, that to me was was a very significant part of this endeavor. And
Well, it's
to see
scattered a
that
lot. I can say
it's
access.
what?
It's scattered a lot. Like it'll be like going to the mall and not knowing what you want, but yet you want to buy something. Everything will entertain you, overstimulate you. No different going to a bookstore and not knowing what you want, but yet you have the ability. I want to consume things. So these platforms are doing the same thing, and it's not just the platform; it could be the chat too. So that's why for me, I value more quality opposed to quantity, because a lot of that for me, it's I'm being a bit obviously rationally selfish, where it doesn't serve. Now there's some people that do certain things like let's say panels where they want something done. I said, okay, so why are you having a public conversation? Why don't you do it privately, and then maybe build some momentum. Again, a lot of this stuff eventually becomes just entertainment for them. Even for myself, I know when I'm being entertained and or why I want to be entertained. So a lot of it misses the message, and then they just settle for things like names. For example, you'll hear. I'm just going to pick on this one particular group. People will use the word Christ or Jesus. I said, so you're just going to be stuck on the name. So, well, what's the message? Same if they're talking about Satan. Okay, that's just a name. What's the message? Or Socrates, that's a name. What's the message? Because I can't apply discernment to a name. I can apply belief systems, but I can't apply discernment. And then when people get presented to something, oh, is that what the Muslims do when they go to Mecca? I said, well, now you know, but do you truly understand and have discernment? What value does it have for you, let alone somebody else? So that's where I usually come out like, oh fuck, I spent, sorry my language, but I spent like 2 hours hoping, and thinking I have to settle now for a gold nugget. I'm the kind of person like, no, bring the truck because I'm hoping you're going to give me thousands of nuggets here. Now, maybe that's me over anticipating what I think I should be receiving, but I like to give just as much as I receive. I'm kind of more of a guy that forward a lot of this information and sharing awareness. When people debate with themselves, I said, okay, so is it productive? Is it producing something, or is this something you could do by yourself? These are the things that go through my head. Access, I just don't share that loud all the time because I realize I already know I'm going to get pushback because I'm reading the energy. And I'm like, okay, but this is grade 1. You guys aren't ready to go to school yet, so can you please leave? And if I realize there's too many of them, then guess who has to leave? It's me, which I'm okay with. I've done that with companies. I love working for a company, but if I find out in the end that, or at least in the process, they outgrew me, few and far between, but it does happen, or I've outgrew them, then why am I still here? Then I have to start becoming honest with the self. Oh, Dom, you're here for fiat currency, or you're here just because you don't want to be at home and bored, or you just want to socialize with people. And I do that even with here. I try to socialize with people. Now, when people say here, well, Dom, I'm here to earn money, I said, okay, so be the best you can be. Because I respect people that are entertaining us. They're getting paid for it, regardless if a person says, but I don't agree with fiat currency. I said, whatever you agree or disagree does means fuck all. You're still here. You're in the system. Spend more time trying to understand the system opposed to what people are doing with the system. Now that's a tough to swallow because then at that point I'm being very opinionated. I said, okay, so how many walls have you built up? Why? Because I'm feeling the resistance here, and resistance is way better than attachments. Because when you go to work out, you need resistance. You don't need fucking attachment. Well, I'm attached to my potato chips, but which one's going to grow you muscles? Whether or not I'm being a hypocrite, and they say, well, Don, but you're not doing it. I said, fuck all what I do. It's still the information. I don't own thoughts. I'm just sharing thoughts. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're absolutely right on the sharing of thoughts and information. As I kind of alluding to earlier, is us being the conduit or the vessel for information kind of subjects us to sometimes ridicule, um, And even sometimes in certain cases, you kind of give an admiring approach to that person when it's the information that holds the substance. And sometimes, some characters are much more aesthetic to receive that information from, you know, some are a lot more abrasive. And I don't think that people have, especially in the mass of the multiverse and even in real life, developed that ability to discern, what is true information and what is basically self-indulgent entertainment, even though it may have some profound significance to it. It's become run of the mill, like aliens. Take aliens for instance. I mean, that's like you said, how do you explain an experience if you was to meet an alien? How do you get that across to people? Everybody understands the concept of UFOs and aliens, and it's mass accepted, and it's speculated on to no end to TV commercials and podcasts, and some people build religions and their life around it. But yet, it's become almost stereotyped to just common information and common acknowledgement. Whereas opposed to if you were to bring an alien on panel and be like, I'm going to interpret for this alien, and hopefully you guys get this. If that resonates with you guys at all.
Access, I'm gonna go in I think maybe a slightly different direction than the last part you were getting at, but it made me think of Dom when you was talking about that resistance, and that's ultimately that resistance that fuels growth, and it makes me think here. Um, this week will be I'm going on 11 weeks being consistent in the gym for 6 days a week, and so I've been using that as a frame of thought for me, and using all of these different lessons that I can apply, that I keep learning, different lessons that I keep applying, and applying them in language that I'm suited to for the gym. But it makes me think of that progressive overload, that concept of continually, gradually adding that weight at safe, healthy levels, but still promoting muscle growth. And access, it makes me connect to what you had said earlier about that constantly going out to the boundaries and establishing where those safety protocols are, and then moving past them at safe, and whatever that, you know what I'm saying, whatever that speed is not going to be the same for everyone. We all have to move forward in advancing those, you know what I'm saying, those, moving those safety protocols forward at different levels. And I think we kind of do it with all the different areas of our life, or at least I'm trying to look at that, where the weight for every different movement is not the same. It's all adapted based on what it's applied to. So I don't know, I just was thinking about that connection between that. But like you said, access, there is a lot of pushback when we start doing that, because a lot of times we see that resistance come up from other people because of the information. It doesn't have nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with the information that we hold, and the conflict that brings to that programming in that person.
Yeah, they'll identify the information with the character when the
Mhm.
character and the information are two completely separate things. You can be an ill character and still come across with some amazing, profound information, and that information won't ever be received well as long as the character is ill, and there has to be a balance between delivering that information, the character, and the personification, and how people identify those two together. And I found that to be a challenge, especially in social media. And I'm sure in your endeavors in this, you're going to run across the same as, you know, the information. I'm just, just a messenger. Don't kill the messenger for the sake of the message,
Well, and even
And
still, that you're still the student. That's the approach. At least the response that I have to that. I'm always the student. Yes, I might teach you. I can only speak of what I know and what I've personally experienced in my own life. But at all times, and that's part of Dom, what you've been hitting on about challenging yourself. That okay, just because I've been exposed to that doesn't mean that's how I have to choose to continue to show up or to no. It's that intentionality now that discretion comes in. That's where all the power lies, and it's that power to what are you gonna do with that? That's where intention comes in now. To circle back again, it's all of these different variables that once you begin tapping into one, there's another one that reveals itself to go even deeper. It's a journey you'll always forever be on. We're always students. Even any of us with all the experience, the wisdom and everything that we have, we're all still students. We're all still experiencing, learning, growing all the time. It's the same process. Just because we teach other people how to do this process, shit, I don't know. I'm still in the process of doing that same process I'm trying to tell y'all about. It's the same process that I'm personally trying to go through, and that reckoning of how do I make sense? Where does this all go? This axis we speak so much of this giant puzzle that we're trying to put together and figure out where all these pieces come together. It, it's a pursuit that will never it will never finish, like you said it before. You hit on that. It's not finished. It's continuous. Every single time it's continuous.
it's plateaus of rest in between that growth, and then we kind of trying to raise the scope of what we see in that. Each piece of the puzzle makes the puzzle. Once you've reached a plateau, then you kind of try and share that plateau with other people. And once it exceeds safety protocol, it's lost on some. But um, I'm curious as to how, as the best way to put this, how you were able to recognize safety protocols within you, and how you began to work with them.
Well, for me, I started to recognize the safety protocols honestly in the same way, the same kind of process that Dom speaks of it. Cause I was recognizing that resistance. I was feeling that. I can feel when you hitting on it. Axis, when when we get to talking about something, I know when you strike a nerve. Cause yeah, you can feel it. If you're any kind of energy sensitive, you can feel those shifts and those changes. And when I met that resistance, instead of running from it, I for a long time I used to just sweep it under the rug, like pretend it just isn't there because I didn't know how to make sense of it. And so when I was able to start pulling it out and start looking at it, then I knew it was opportunities to grow. All of those places, okay, just because this has been keeping me alive, keeping me in my survival mode, has functionally got me to this place, doesn't mean that it serves me in any purpose in my life or in every purpose in my life. And so for me now, it's the process of compartmentalizing exactly where does this belong? Where does this go? How do I put where in my system of processing, where does this go? And that's what that functionally looks like for me when I'm challenging my own self and what that all looks like. But it starts with that resistance and being able to sit there with that resistance, even if it's a low weight, even if it's 5 pounds, and you're just sitting there holding that resistance at the end of it, at the end of your set. even if it starts there, you build, it's not even building up against to that resistance, but you become accustomed to it. You sit in it, and then once you've sat in it, then there's this great opportunity for now, what do I do with it? And there's infinite possibilities for what that looks like. And it's really just whatever direction you want to take it in, and that's the exciting part to me, because it's constantly growing, evolving, living, breathing. It's changing as I'm changing every second.
That's growth. That's as opposed to one setting stagnant without experiencing higher resistance. That was well put, Kelly. That was very well put, very well received. Um, because I'm just, you know, the dedication that you've shown to your regiment that you started in the gym is also a testament to the regiment you start with the mind. And when you start pushing against the resistance and you expand that, the potentials of what endeavors you set out on suddenly do take on many more possibilities. And the scope and range of your capabilities become almost infinitely boundless because you haven't just become adjusted to this 5 pound weight and that's as far as you're going to go. It's keeping you sustained, but it's not a development of growth. And the application of the gym, the mind, it's all uh, a way to maintain health in the mind and health in the body. And I've come the hard way to learn that you got to keep them both in balance. So you put that in great perspective. Great perspective, Kelly. So I take it on better days then, when you're feeling more, um, I guess, adventurous in the being or the self. You reflect that in how you interact with your pursuit in the day of being at the gym. You tend to, you know, amp up the resistance on better days.
So for me, I have to, like, the same process that I apply, that I ask you. I continually say this because this is the same. It's the same process that I learned that works for me, and it's the conversations that I started having with myself. I ask you, where are we at? How you feeling? What is the first thing I ask you in the morning when I get here? How was your night? How are we feeling? Like, what's been going on? Catch me up. Get me up to speed. Let me know where we're at. And when I started having that conversation with myself, okay, then I can start doing that with other people. It became abundantly clearer, easier to do that with other people, when I did that. But for me, I recognized in this process of reckoning with myself, I understand, especially as a woman, I'm so, I don't want to say dependent, because I'm not just dependent on my emotions, but I do rely heavily on my emotions. And so for me, it's important to me to meet myself where I'm at in that day to day. So yes, I want to be consistent. Yes, I'm there 6 days a week. There's no question about it. That's the way it's going to be. But and that's just that's only because that's what I've decided at this time in this season of my life, that I'm willing to commit that to that. I'm not saying everybody that's the right balance for everybody. That's not, I'm not saying that, but that's the right balance for me. And to me, that's what looking and showing up consistently looks like on a regular basis. But within that, I have my main framework of, okay, I have a list of all my exercises that I do, and the ones that I tend to do on the same days, for my workout routine that I've had consistently, and I copy and paste that from one week to the next, and then make adaptations and adjustments, increases my weight and everything as I need to, but then I can go back and track all of that, where I started and where I'm going. But for me, some days I am, you see me, I come in and I'm geeked. I'm a very, very high energy level and ready to go to the gym. Like, and then other days I'm just going to be transparent. I'm not that level. Like, I don't know. And nothing wrong. That's not where I'm at right now. And so for me, I like to vocalize and use that framework when we're talking about it, especially when we're here, access, when we talk about that, because it's helpful. I mean, let's first identify where you're at before you can in any kind of way, shape, or form try and go anywhere else. You first got to know where the hell you're at. If you're gonna try and go anywhere, unless you're just straight up adventuring and just everything is unknown, that's a whole different ball game. But that's why I use this framework. And then another one that I use commonly, that we use all the time, is day by day and piece by piece. So I know that there's people that's listening to this. Let me just encourage you real quick that nothing about any of these processes, any of this that we've mentioned today up until this point, none of this is an easy thing. Just because we talk about it and it maybe doesn't come across as the most difficult thing, but this is literally battling with your own self every single day, let alone anybody else, let alone any adversary, anything else. You're battling with your own self every day. And every day is not going to be the mountaintop experience. That's the reality of it. Every day I'm not going to come in, be amped up and juiced up, just ready to get in the gym. Every day is not like that. But what I'm learning, instead of, to go back again, Dom, on what you hit on, that instead of fighting all that energy, instead of trying to shame myself into, well, you should have all this high function and energy all the time. That's not sustainable for me. That's just a reality I realized in myself. That's not sustainable for me. And so I had to learn and realize to adapt that my ways, I had to change the way that I measured growth, the way that I tracked that for my own self, because every day, what my best that I have to offer every day is not the same to myself, to everybody else. It's not the same. And so learning to realize and identify the weight that, okay, I can comfortably do this, and then at the end go and add that weight. Okay, but I'm progressively overloading. I'm teaching myself, even if it's one rep at a time, I'm teaching my body, I'm teaching my mind, I'm teaching my spirit to practice these disciplines, these pursuits of virtues, these pursuits of whatever I have determined is worthy of my time, worthy of me to invest my attention to learning, because we're learning with all this. We all three, we know very clearly that our time is valuable because of the gifts and abilities that we have. So none of us have just infinite time to do everything and anything. So we're going to have to make decisions, and that's where discernment comes into how to manage that time, how to steward. We only have access to the resources that we have access, and needs to the audience that we have needs to. Okay, but what are you going to do with that? It's that question that you can see, that resistance. You can see all of these things, all these opportunities, all these things, these little things that happen throughout the day. Okay, all these unexpected things. Yes, it has an opportunity to almost, unhinge you a little bit. That balance is off. You feel that lack of stability, swaying a little bit. But if you remember that at every single opportunity, it's an opportunity for you to choose, okay, what am I going to make of this? That can unbalance me. That can, you know what I'm saying, make me shake back and forth a little bit. Okay, whatever. Now it's got my attention, like you spoke of before, Dom. Bring it to my attention. Now I get to choose what to do with it, if anything. Some of it's just meant to experience and just release. And I love that there's so much power in that, because it makes every decision a conscious decision if you choose to. And I love that.
I will say, and as an observer, your consistency is impeccable, Kelly. I mean, I've seen you really struggle to get through the day, and still your persistency, regardless of how you feel, has still been consistent. And that to me is
Let me speak to
that
you on that axis real quick. I am learning that I thrive in these kinds of moments, that I can expose myself in certain times. And this is one that I just want to speak to somebody. I know there's people listening that that didn't always be the case. That wasn't always the case. I haven't always, it hasn't been something that's been so easy. Like 2 or 3 years ago, I couldn't do that. I didn't even, that wasn't a skill I even knew how to do. I didn't even know I needed the skill, let alone possess it or learn how to do it. It takes time. It takes intentionality. It takes that showing up. Okay. I might only show up for an hour or 5 minutes or whatever, any variation in between, whatever it is. It's that process of showing up, that conversation, that it's the same themes, that challenging. Okay, just because I'm thinking all this stuff, just because I have all these thoughts, doesn't mean that they're reality. Let me check them real quick. Let me hold them up to the light. Let me get a better, clearer look at what's going on here. That's the opportunity that every moment we have. And I don't know, for me, I'm just learning that I don't know, every moment that looks like a little bit of something different, but it's the same process. Ultimately, it's just the same process being repeated. And so that means, to me, it's comforting because it's different than that same repetition of that cycle and not producing any fruit. That same repetition of a cycle that's not producing the desired fruit, because we do that too. The difference here is I'm learning different cycles, that I can use the cyclical nature that I see all around me and use that to my advantage, and the seeds that I choose to plant based on the crop that I desire to bring in.
I've seen evidence of that, not only in my own life, but watching you and seeing the development of different personalities on the metaverse. And showing up is half the battle. If you can keep that consistency and that forward momentum, no matter what that looks like, that's where the beginning of possibility starts with whatever you endeavor on. Show up, and show up with the expectation of whatever's possible can transpire. Do you have any particular approach that you take to a day, Dom? Whenever you start your day off, or you start your consistency of a day, or do you just kind of endeavor into whatever potentials are there and flow with it?
Well, if I'm working, which I haven't been in the last couple of weeks, there's usually a structure to that, but usually not that. I usually do the online thing now recently, so that's usually my structure right now.
So you're kind of at the you're kind of at the whims and wills of what you encounter, and the best that you can attribute to that or take from it.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it, actually. Yeah. Sometimes structures come in a form. If you have an ailment, then it becomes a structure. Oh, I got to take care of myself. But yes.
Awesome. That's awesome.
For a person that's usually all over the map, I do need structure, but a lot of times I don't do it.
I'm guilty. I'm sure we're all,
Me
the
too.
state of learning. Yeah. That's just gonna, I think that's gonna be a part of the state of learning, and just one of the processes of it. And being all over the map is kind of helped me develop a sense of being able to understand diversity. strange things, unfamiliar things, or even the unknown. You're endeavoring into that starts with a consistency of self, and it may be all over the place. It's where, like you said, Kelly, where you meet it. It's not always going to be the same. It's not always going to be the same energy where you meet, but it will be a, a flow of energy that you can, if you're diverse enough and you're persistent enough, develop a skill to be able to match that energy. Kind of like she carries this little pin on her that's really cool. What's that pin say, Kelly?
It says I match energy, so how are you gonna act today?
Exactly, and that's a part of the consistency of meeting people. They set the tone sometimes, and we have to operate off of that tone that's being set. And I think that's a first part of, after you've discovered self, is being able to discover others and where they start and where they stop and the measurement of them. And to me, that's been a very useful skill. And obviously, Kelly, you utilize that quite well dealing with me. I can be all over the place at any point in the day, but there's a lot to be said for matching a person's energy and being able to take them further into self-discovery and being able to broaden themselves. Um, I'm absolutely content with the stream today. I got to get my daily regimen started, but eh, I would love to hear from you guys, parting comments or even a statement that kind of brings us together.
If you don't mind, Kelly, I'll share a little bit before you
Yeah,
come.
go ahead. Yep.
A little bit on the back end of what I just said earlier about structure. It is a double-edged sword, for especially, well, for myself. I can't speak for other people. For myself, because I can become a workaholic, distract myself with all kinds of stuff. I do that even with information. So again, it's not enough, too much. So it's a balancing act. But even that, I think the balancing act's an illusion for me anyway. So those are what I would call struggles. Because when you entertain yourself with something, you enjoy it, but then you realize, okay, am I jonesing on it? So, but overall, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, Kelly. I look forward to more conversations with you. And if you have your own channel, I'll gladly come and whether go on to chat or if you do live panels and access like usual. Thank you.
Absolutely, Dom. And as usual, it's been an honor to have you here. Your input is always welcome, and you're always a welcome guest. Um, Ellie, any closing statements?
Well, I want to say thank you again. Thank you guys both for having me. And spend the time to go into all these different places. Access, I know we have, the conversations we do, but Dom, you definitely, we talked about before this that we anticipated this balancing effect when the three of us would have a conversation, and I definitely have felt that this morning. It's been really cool, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity and the ability to be a part of that conversation. Um, what I would say too, to kind of hit back a little bit and circle back, access on what you had said about setting the tone. I think it's also important for us to remember that as we go through the day, that we have the opportunity to set our own tone as well. That we don't have to be dependent on anybody else to set the tone for us. That the more that we lean into all of these gifts, the more that at least I, for myself, personally find the more ability. It's the same thing with the gym. The more that I push myself, the more that more that I realize I can do. Like, hang on, no, like I can go back and show you all kinds of evidence, stuff that I know is fact. It's not just my speculation, my feelings about it, or well, I feel it was a little bit easier. No, it's not none of that because I can show you. There's something tangible. That's the evidence of growth. There's some kind of fruit produced, and I just, yeah, I think we could probably keep going on with the same conversation, keep going over and over again. But yes, thank you guys again. I appreciate it most definitely.
Absolutely, and I look forward to future panels. It's been an honor to have you guys as guests. To chat naturally. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you for being here. It's been a wonderful show. I hope that people that catch this in the future and that are listening take something from it of value. And you know, we're fortunate. We're fortunate for this. So thank you all very much. And till the next time, access out.